Welcome to Creating Abundance with Alana Cahoon, sharing inspirational stories from experts around the world. Tap into your inner wisdom at alanacahoon.com. Hi, and welcome to Creating Abundance, inspiring you to create a vibrant life of health, wealth, and happiness. My name is Alana Cahoon. I am delighted to introduce today's guest, Erin LoPorto. Erin brings her playful, intuitive, and compassionate spirit to everything she does. She is a speaker, podcaster, and somatic embodiment coach. Erin can be described as a transformative force who is committed to empowering people to heal themselves through body-based self-healing and self-coaching tools. With over a decade of private practice, she has developed a signature process for success, the Embodied Freedom Formula. Let's welcome Erin. Hi.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to see you.
I love seeing you. You're always just a radiant beam of light, Erin. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Where are you calling in from today?
I'm in Massachusetts. So that is my base, about 40 minutes outside of Boston. Um,
Lovely. One of my favorite
and
areas.
yeah, we're experiencing spring here and, New England spring. So it's like rainy and cold one day and super warm and sunny the next.
Sounds like the same here on the northeast of Rochester, New York. Yeah.
hmm Definitely.
So I would love for you to share with everyone what somatic, let's see, what is it called? Somatic
Somatic embodiment
embodiment.
coach.
Yeah, you're a somatic embodiment coach. Enlighten all of us. I have an idea, and
Yeah.
I probably know, but yeah, tell us more about what that is.
So, um, it kind of started for me with understanding and knowing that I had this mind body relationship. Like, if I was stressed about something as a child, like I would manifest actual sickness. If I even pretended that I was having an asthma attack to get out of something, I would end up with that asthma attack. If I had relationship stuff, I noticed like I always had a pain in my right hip. So there was something that kind of personal experience of my body kind of taking over in so many ways or holding my life experience in so many ways is what kind of got me exploring this. And simultaneously, I experienced trauma and ended up with an eating disorder. So I was really against my body when I started knowing like I am at war with my body and I need to heal this relationship to it. And I like talking about somatic work and embodiment work because both of them can be very similar, but somatic means of the body. It's all of the sensations that we experience in the body. And then embodiment work can be our experience of self through the body. So embodiment's a little bigger, broader definition. Somatic is included in that. But sometimes embodiment work can just be like take on a pose, use this pose to get into a different state. And somatic is much more about like feeling all the intricate details within that rather than just striking a pose. So coming together is what they've found is the most healing. It's kind of like top down, bottom up, like bringing awareness to experience that you're creating. And so much happens to heal the nervous system in that space of awareness and action together.
I
So,
love that. Wow. I'm getting a memory of when I was in New York City, and I spent a lot of time at the New York Open Center, Holistic Learning Center. And I took a program about body image.
mhm.
At the time, I was, just as almost all of us are under stress to lose weight, right? And at that time, it was really, really a big deal. And I did this one project with the teacher where you lie down on the floor and you lift your hands up above you. And then with your eyes closed, you place them down next to your hips where you think your hips really, really are. And like everyone in the room like added another 6 to 12 inches. So that was just, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, that I got to work on this.
Yeah. There's another thing. I mean, it's about body image, but there's also a piece of proprioception in that too, which
Hmm.
is knowing where you are in space and time. So oftentimes, if you extend your arms straight, if you're looking at one arm and extend both arms parallel to the earth, likely that one that you're not looking at, you're looking at the screen right now. But like if you look this way and extend the other arm out, oftentimes this one will be lower. The back one that you're not seeing will be lower. So that ability to like look and see where we actually are and really mapping out what it feels like to be there is proprioception, or how to develop
Wow.
proprioception.
That's amazing. So I'm visualizing Virabhadrasana 2, right? Warrior
Mhm.
2, you've got your arms out, you're looking over your front arm, and the back arm, I'm always like, how come that's going down?
Yeah.
Now I know why.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of like, the more you practice, the more you can strengthen that awareness of where you are in space and time. But otherwise, we often don't have that neural pathway, that physical experience mapping to like what we look like. So when it comes to body image, we spend so much time thinking versus feeling and touching and exploring, like, oh, here is where we actually are. And I want to share a funny story about body image, if I can, for a second,
Please do.
because we all have those things where we think our nose is so big, or we think our hips are so big, or we think that, all of these things about ourselves, that in part we create that by thinking about it so much that what you focus on expands. And I went to art school where I had to do self portraits. um, but we had to do like each feature on 18 by 24 paper, which is pretty big. And I was like staring at my reflection, drawing my mouth for like a week. And I would be like drawing my mouth, like talking to my friends, looking in the mirror, drawing my mouth, talking to my friends, looking at the mirror. And all of a sudden, it was like my mouth got so distorted. And I was like, guys, I have horse teeth. How has nobody told me that I had horse teeth before? And literally, just from observing this part of my face in like a out of context way of seeing my whole face, like it just expanded in my mind. And it took me about a month to actually not walk around covering my mouth, because it really was like distorted in my mind. I was seeing my mouth literally bigger than I normally ever saw it before. So, just the invitation to see yourself as the whole and all of your unique parts going together to make your unique self, like it has its own, awesome proportions. And when we obsess about those little details, or trying or think that we might be better served by looking more like somebody else or having the features of somebody else, like we're missing our own like brilliant wholeness. So,
Oh, brilliant wholeness. Did you hear that? Don't miss your own brilliant wholeness. All of it's fantastic. And
mhm.
that's about being authentic too. I was thinking about authenticity this morning and how it's so wonderful to show up as you and not the limitations that have been placed on us throughout our lifetime, not the expectations of the culture or the time of what's trendy, what's not, but just showing up as you, as who you are.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of courage to do that. And like people who are authentic, who can show up as them, like I always, appreciate and bow to their spirit, and like to the way that they are the ones making the road or inspiring others to do so, because we do have an innate desire to belong as humans. We still have a tribal mentality that we know if we're kicked out of the tribe, we might not survive. Like we've got hunter and gatherer in our DNA still. So it's kind of going against, when we really speak for ourselves. Um, so my question is always like, how do we create the communities and the acceptance of otherness? Um, and how do we tolerate what it might charge up in us if we are to embrace all the unique differences rather than pulling everybody into a box and having this small sense of belonging that makes us feel safe, but often makes us feel very unfulfilled or unexpressed in our lives as a whole.
Yeah. One of the most beautiful aspects of our world is the variety of cultures.
Absolutely.
As you were talking, I was visualizing that image of the planet, right? You've got planet Earth and all the people standing around it, holding hands of every color, every shape,
Every
every sexual
size.
orientations,
Yeah,
like all of
absolutely.
it. If we all showed up as the same, we may as well just be, I don't know, that would be terrible. That would be artificial. Like, that would be like
Yeah.
robots.
Yeah. And still, one of my teachers talked about all relationships having like an unconscious agreement of here is my you can see me parts. Here are the parts of me that I am comfortable with. And if you start to touch into the other areas that I'm not comfortable with, I'm going to have to push back. Right. And oftentimes that, I always am like, find the mentors that have been where you want to go so that they can invite you on that journey. Because if you ask somebody who's had a 9 to 5 their whole life and that's been their safety, how do I start my own business? They're going to say, that's not a good idea. They're going to give you all of their beliefs that have kept them safe, that are choosing how they want to live. So there's this place of like, courage is recognizing you can choose outside of what is comfortable and to find the people that are matching while still loving. Like, most of the time when we ask people advice about ourselves or tell me what you see, they're telling us more about them than us. And having that understanding and awareness of like, oh, they're not rejecting me, because sometimes that's why we don't step out or be ourselves. They're rejecting that part of themselves that they likely often have because they haven't figured out how to hold it yet. And by me stepping out authentically, like that might actually give them, they might have resistance at first, but it's actually giving them permission to do the same.
That is such a gem that I don't want to have lost. So I'm going to repeat it.
Okay.
What I heard you say, and part of it is when someone criticizes you or places judgment or simply gives a different opinion, their
Yeah.
limiting beliefs. Well, that's it. It's their limiting beliefs
Hmm.
and how they have protected themselves. This is how they've
Yes.
survived in life. And in a way, they're not doing it to limit you, or they're doing it to protect you because it worked for them.
Yes.
And not to take it personally, but simply as, oh, this is how they live their lives. And
Exactly.
you can choose to follow their path or follow your own.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those places that I think like everything comes out of love, but that's where it gets so missed and misinterpreted so many times because it's like what is protective love can often feel very limiting to others and not, even though it's offered in the vein of love, it can be very hurtful. So just kind of holding, that's like the other way that I hold things. Everything comes from love. And not everything feels like love.
Ooh, yes. So it's when someone is talking to you with their beliefs, it's about them, it's not about you. Receive it with compassion. I mean, that is just
Mhm.
pure meta love compassion that you're
Mhm.
explaining. So thank you for all these words of wisdom that you're sharing with the audience and
Absolutely.
me. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I work a lot with people with relationship stuff. Once they kind of like get that self, it's like, how do we be us in relationships? So we do a lot of talking about what does it feel like versus what was the intention, and like, how can you have compassion for both of those things and for yourself and the other?
Yeah. It's interesting with relationships. You know, I, we want to think that we choose our friends,
Hmm.
and in a way we do. And we, right, it's like, I can choose my friends, but I can't choose my family. And yet, what I've seen again and again is the very friends you choose are replicating the relationship you have with your family. So, whether you work it out through your family Or
Mhm.
not, you're most likely going to work it out through your friends and loved ones in other relationships. What do you think about
Absolutely.
that? Yeah.
No, I think it's very true, and I think, I've had a couple times where I've put boundaries on somebody who's very close to me in my life just so that a stranger can show up with the exact same kind of elements in their persona and me engaging with them in a way that's not initially triggering because they're not so close to me. They're not family. It's not like years of being frustrated by it, but it's like, oh, I see you. I understand you. I know what's going on here, but it's actually replacing that pattern over here.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's kind of like the way we do anything is the way we do everything. And, you know, to really transform, I always like to go back. There's like that saying, like you're, if you think you're enlightened, go home. Because that's where all of those primary relationships are and patterns are that are going to make you feel like tethered and unbound and frazzled and all of that. So yeah, I've definitely seen myself attract the things, and I think that it's so that we can heal. It's like in yoga and Buddhism, like there's the concept of non-attachment, but we have to understand that attachment comes in two forms: aversion, which is like stay away from me, and craving, which is like I want. So both of those are attachment, and oftentimes we'll, with our family of origin, we'll be like, I'm never doing that again. But as we push away, we're also attracting something too in this unbalanced way. So all of that is just this heat and work for us to touch those parts of ourselves that we're not safe to touch. And as we do, then we can like be less craving, less in aversion, and more free to be ourselves in
I think
relationship.
that's beautiful that you used Buddhism as an example, and that it's both. It's not in avoid your strongest desires because you'll go off the deep end or whatever, and it's not aversions. It's both sides of the spectrum. There's a beautiful saying that's it's about the one taste of the inseparable heart. It's all of it. It's the dark and it's the light. And I think
Yes,
we've been trained to repulse the darkness and not see it, not work through it. Sometimes the darkness is called the shadow, uh,
absolutely.
right? But in that really desired fame of or place of perfection of only being in the light, and then that darkness or that shadow self becomes shame and guilt and fear and anxiety. And to allow it to surface, say, okay, well, here's my other, there's maybe it is a dark side or the less attractive side, but it's part of me. So how do I live in the middle? What is the middle
Yeah.
way? Mhm.
I think you're absolutely right, and there's kind of the idea of happily ever after, like that. I think has kind of rocked our consciousness, so that we think if we're not happily ever after, then we must have something like wrong going on. Um, but I also think about like that experience of peace. Like most people want that place to just like land in peace. And from my experience that I learned through doing pigeon pose, in fact, which is a deep yoga pose hip opener, um, is that to obtain peace, it's not getting free of the things that you're resistance to. It's literally that making space for everything, making space for pain, making space for fear, making space for resistance, making space for whatever is already there. And as we do that, then we can like soften in and have this experience of peace. But it's certainly not the absence of aversion, which is what we tend to do to get to those feel good places versus our place of wholeness.
Again, that's beautiful. I totally agree. And I'm picturing you in pigeon pose. And for anyone who's done it, you know it can feel really good until you've you're in the pose for a long time, then it doesn't feel so good. It's like, how do you stay with the pain and shift your body so that it's not as painful and shifting your awareness, shifting your breath, your relationship to your body, to the pose, to the belief. That's really cool.
Yeah. I never had the feel good experience in pigeon pose until after 5 years of practicing it. I never had my hips on the ground. Like I was just so tight and my whole body would sweat and get hot and agitated, and it was like the most difficult pose. Even child's pose was a really, really hard time for me because my hips were so tight when I first started practicing yoga. And it wasn't until I actually introduced somatic awareness into my practice where I got curious about, like, what am I holding in my hips? Like, what's going on here, without judgment or expectation. And the word that came up was devastation. And I realized I carried a lot of devastation in my hips. And I, for about 6 months, would get in that pose with a new approach and just cry out all those feelings. And eventually, my hips, very naturally, in that 6 months, could come down to the ground. And I had space to breathe and I could relax a little more in it. Um, but when I first practiced and made it about the pose and, like it was hard to breathe. It was a different thing. So understanding that like a lot of times people who practice yoga and have that flexibility, these things that are so relaxing and so comfortable for them, like comes from practice or comes from how they're naturally built. So I like to open the windows to yoga, is that like it's not all relaxing at first for people. And sometimes we push ourselves too hard to look like the teacher or look like the thing. And yoga is a metaphor for life. Where are the other places in our lives that we're pushing ourselves too hard or trying to look like the right thing and torturing ourselves in the process? So,
So I'm getting another memory of being in pigeon pose in a New York City yoga studio, and the instructor literally came over to me and sat on.
yeah.
She sat on, facing away from me. I see on the mat, and her weight pushed my hip down into the ground and actually aligned the pose.
Mhm.
So I'd been practicing yoga for a long time,
Mhm.
many years. And that was the first time I got an understanding of it. And to your point of the somatic embodiment, what was stored within me that I wasn't willing to do that on my own? So,
Mhm.
A, I was out of alignment, and B, there was fear.
Yeah.
So often we hold fear in our bodies, and you had described another emotion, and these emotions that build up in our bodies, if they're not removed, then they do become hardened, whether as emotional blocks or literal manifestations of illnesses. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And I like to really draw a line in the sand here, that I do believe that some illness is not because of what we've done or what we're holding, but it's also just part of our path. There's a lot of people in the place that believe in the mind body connection, that when somebody's diagnosed with something, it's like, well, what do you think that's about? What work aren't you doing? And I don't ever want to put anything in the category of shaming somebody for part of their human experience, like, or feeling like it's anybody's fault that we have any of these kind of illnesses and stuff. But a lot of times, yeah, we look at kind of the way things manifest in this world, and they often manifest energetically before they manifest physically. And oftentimes we're so in our head, we don't even feel or notice some of those initial manifestations of something's wrong. I talk to people often about, who's ever hurt yourself exercising before. And like 90% of the population will always raise their hand. And I was like, and who had some inkling that that injury was coming before it actually happened. And then like about, 60 to 70% of people will raise their hand like they felt something going on before everything popped. Sometimes things just pop. Um, but I like to kind of hold the thing that at first our body whispers and then it speaks and then it screams at us and it kind of pulls us to the ground to force us to take care of it. So, how can we get really attuned to listening when the body's whispering? And the body is constantly telling us yes and no. In general, this is like a really abridged version of a bigger lesson and experience that I take people through. But in general, when the body says yes to something, it feels expansive, it feels relaxed, and it feels energized. And when it says no to something, it tends to contract and it tends to deplete our energy. So a lot of times we sit there like right, wrong, like what are the decisions I want to make? But we can actually start to check in with our body about like what's going to give my body the most energy. What is my body most excited about? Does my body want to weigh in on this decision with me? And just really simply there, when we're making choices all the time that are causing tension in our body, that's pulling our posture in way, that's stopping blood flow in way, that all builds up year over year um, in terms of things that manifest later on. Or there's a interesting thing that oftentimes we feel like things are happening to us, but kind of opening to the space of like, oh, we might actually be creating these things that are happening to us if we get really present, or things are happening for us. And even that shift of this happened to me versus this happened for me, like I find that my body kind of opens a little more and gets a little more curious and doesn't feel the need to protect so much just by that little thing. So we can use our the way we think about things, even if the event's the same. What are the thoughts that we're having around the events that support our body in opening and being present and having energy to deal with it versus close our body off and shut us down and make us feel fearful and like we don't have resources. So I hope that kind of weaved
No, that was,
path to how it's connected.
yeah, our bodies are connected. I like to use the metaphor of our bodies being an antenna. Just as you said, right? It
Yeah, I
whispers.
love that.
Yeah, it whispers, it talks, it shouts, it can knock us right down. And so being attuned, and that's mindfulness, that's being in
Mhm.
the present moment. And you can do that. There's so many different techniques, whether it's yoga, meditation, uh, yoga meditation, or any kind of meditation, reflection meditation. And in the simplest form, it's simply pausing
Yeah.
and being in the present moment, knowing that outside nature is continuing, the birds are flying, the grass is growing, whether it's raining or the sun is shining, and wherever you are, coming back into that present moment, literally touching, feeling the desk or the chair or your body, and just saying, "Oh yeah, I'm here. I'm okay. Everything's okay." All
Yeah.
the rest of it is thought. So coming back home to yourself
Mhm.
and listening and saying, "Okay, well, what are you trying to tell me?" Yeah, right?
Yeah, having a dialogue with your body is very profound. I like to hold meditation in its simplest essence as awareness, placing your attention on anything so that you gain more awareness about that place that you're placing attention. And it's very easy and it's very natural, and everybody can do that. And some people get confused about, and some people, even teachers, can be confused about meditation is that place of peace or an experience, but that is experience is something when a lot of our kind of cultural anxieties have like already diminished to some extent. And a lot of times people will think that they can't meditate because they can't slow down or they can't settle their thoughts. But to understand that even becoming aware of the fact that you have racing part thoughts is part of meditation and can be one of the first steps to experiencing meditation, and that there is no wrong way to become more aware and to have lots of compassion for that moment that you might not like what you become aware of. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. And this is an important part of how I teach meditation where I come from, because I started my first meditation practice was walking, because I couldn't still my body and I couldn't calm myself down. I had such high anxiety and such a frequency of panic attacks that sitting still was just not an option. I was very loud and aggressive. Like I'm like, I kind of like refer to it like people will refer, you mean old Aaron? And I'm like, yeah, old Aaron. Um, but walking gave me a place, and I could do power yoga, but I tended to skip shavasana. I couldn't settle and relax in that. So to really make that space for, it doesn't have to look traditional, like the exploration of meditation or the exploration of self awareness. It can look like what gives you that sense of expansion or what feels right in your body, and not to compare yourself. One of my favorite quotes is from Brian Kess, who says, the fastest way to disrespect yourself is to compare yourself to someone else. So, you know, there's also a saying that, like, don't look at the path, don't follow the path, like look at what the masters sought. So, where is it that you're looking to go, and what's your best way of getting there?
I like to think of it as suiting or matching your meditation style with your personality.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So important. And being willing for that to change too. Like if something stops working, I just listened to a podcast on Vipassana yoga, and some people that got really messed up doing Vipassana yoga over and over, Vipassana meditation, over and over and over again, and just using it as its only source. But like if something stops working, go with that, explore new options, and don't even be attached to the things that got you to where you are, even no matter how much something has like served you. The second it stops serving you, become aware and keep letting yourself evolve.
I was just going to say it's about evolving. But
Absolutely.
if you aren't aware enough of what you're feeling, how you're feeling, and being willing to look at it. And that's where the courage comes from. And it
Yeah.
takes great courage to breathe into your heart center, your heart chakra in the center of your chest, to breathe in and say, how am I feeling? How am I really feeling? Or
Yeah.
why am I feeling that way? And I've been doing this work for years and I still get blocks. And the other day I woke up very unhappy and so I knew I had to nurture that and I took extra time to simply be with the feeling until the source arose.
Yeah.
And it turned out the night before I had gone out with some friends and someone said something that really hurt me and
Yeah.
I didn't realize at the time how hurtful
Mhm.
it was. And if you don't take the time to check in and give yourself the space to be with the pain, then is I believe when we start shoving it down. I don't have time for this. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't matter. I've got to do this,
Mm.
and that.
Yeah.
But you got to return
Yeah.
home and check in with your body because it really you feel it. You feel it in different places of your body. Um, so we only have a few more minutes. I'm curious of two things. One is healing trauma that gets stored in the body, and the other is just give us an example of what a typical coaching session in your line of work might look like.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times there are a lot of maps about this kind of trauma gets stored here and this kind of trauma gets stored here. And I like to throw most of those maps away. Sometimes I do work with the chakra system, but there's always the outliers, and there are always like the metaphors when we talk about the body and like where it's storing that, are better when they're personal to the individual. I do a lot of expression stuff, like different ways of expressing what is felt in the body, whether that's drawing it out or moving it in certain ways, or even enacting different scenes or recreating different scenes that may feel impactful in your life, but that you know, you kind of are numb to. So, like, if we experience